We show our power through force. That's how we do it. Christ shows his power through surrender. There is normally too much going on in any given reading to adequately cover everything. But this is especially true in today's gospel reading. Today we encounter Jesus' first miracle in Mark, in which he cast out the demon of the man in Capernaum. And there have been many attempts to reduce Jesus' miracles to mundane, if not still incredible, explanations in this last century. The demon-possessed will often become schizophrenics or epileptics, whom Jesus cures. But the problem such narratives create is that they do not humanize Jesus to make his ministry more palatable to modern listeners. After all, it would be no less miraculous to cure someone of epilepsy than to cast out a demon. However, such interpretations serve only to demonize the mentally ill. This mode of thinking, while seeming eminently reasonable, has further troubling implications when you consider the place of the mentally disabled, such as stroke victims, Alzheimer's patients, those born with mental disabilities and other genetic differences that affect their social standing, like Down syndrome. Some of the people are no doubt sick, but others it's not so clear-cut. What is the place in God's kingdom for those who suffer disease, disorder, disability, or those whose difference causes us to make them suffer? Interestingly, what we see is that often it is such as these who are the ones who recognize Jesus most clearly. Even the blind see him for who he truly is. As blind Bartimaeus says, "O Son of David, have mercy on me." While the disciples are told, "Have you eyes but do not see, ears but do not hear?" So it is not physical ability or even mental acuity that helps us to see God. As Paul said in the letter today, knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. If you want to know God, you have to love God. Or as the Cloud author says, it is not through thinking that we might find out God, only through love may he be got. Stanley Hauerwas, a noted ethicist, in his writing on the mentally disadvantaged, calls them icons who show us the true nature of ourselves, that we too are dependent upon others to help us in life, and that we cannot of ourselves help ourselves. He also says that it is this that causes us to despise them. They show us the truth of ourselves, as does Christ. But rather than attempt to reduce Jesus' ministry of healing purely to the realm of modern medicine, the question that kept recurring to me in thinking on this passage was, how do we know Jesus is who he says he is, and how do we know that God is God? It's only a few chapters later, after all, that Jesus is accused of being the devil himself, to which he responds, "How can Satan cast out Satan?" And the Gospels are full of stories of Jesus exercising power over the natural order, healing disease, calming the storm, raising the dead, and so on. But in the ancient world, claims such as these were not extraordinary. These were par for the course, the bare minimum of what was expected of anyone who claimed the title Son of God. God, after all, is the creator of the natural world, and so of course he can affect the course of nature. In the Old Testament, the way that God's power is evidenced to the Israelites is in that they continued to exist. God is God because he liberated us from Egypt, because he established the nation, because even in the midst of exile and war and empire, we're still here. This is a line of thinking that carries on to this day. I believe it was yesterday was 𝐤𝐢𝐭𝐡, in which the Jewish community remembers the Holocaust and says to themselves, we're still here. Or as Ched Myers said so much more poetically than I think I could, he said, proof of God's lordship is demonstrated by the way in which the Lord presides over the rise and fall of nations and peoples. The miracle of the Exodus story lies not in the nature epiphanies and plagues, but in the liberation of the Hebrew people from slavery in Pharaoh's Egypt. The miracle is not to be seen so much in God's parting the Red Sea, because the Red Sea already recognizes God's lordship. The miracle is in the vanquishing of the Egyptian military machine, because it did not recognize God's lordship. I really love Myers's approach to the miracles. Too often people try to reduce the miracles down to these natural phenomena or divine magic. And Myers basically doesn't comment on any of that, because they're more than divine magic and they're more than natural phenomenon. God doing supernatural things is a given. God softening the hearts of sinners, the continued existence of God's people, these are the things that make God God. Parting the sea, calming the storm, these are to be expected. But redemption, repentance, newness of life, that is good news. As the psalm today says, the works of his hands are faithfulness and justice, and his commandments are sure. They stand fast forever and ever, because they are done in truth and equity. He sent redemption to his people. He commanded his covenant forever. Holy and awesome is his name. Parting the sea, while impressive, only lasted for a moment. But the establishment of the house of Abraham, that's forever. Casting out a demon at Capernaum and other miracles are impressive, but the cross stands forever. We know that God is God because he keeps his promises. We know that Jesus is who he says he is because the cross still stands in opposition to the powers of this world. It still unmasks the delicate lie of empire. It still reveals the misguided nature of a humanity that believes might makes right, that believes violence is somehow a solution, that believes social, political, or physical force is the only path forward. Christ does this by turning on its head the logic of power. We show our power through force. That's how we do it. Christ shows his power through surrender. As the 𝐒𝐿𝐼 says, "O God, you declare your almighty power chiefly in showing mercy and pity." And so God, the Son of God, takes on our flesh to show us the true nature of his power. And what does he do? He dies. He surrenders himself to the power of death because he is showing us that death's power, while great, is not final. Resurrection is forever. For Christ, having died, will never die again. Casting out a demon is impressive. Overthrowing the power of death through dying? conquering the empire that killed him by the power of the very weapon they used against him. Now that's the power and poetry of a God who keeps his promises. I mean, this is Mark's gospel in a nutshell. It is in the unassuming, the easily forgettable, the least likely of people that God does his most astounding work. What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? The final words of a demon who we can only assume has been ignored by the scribes and was not even on the radar of the priest in Jerusalem. And you can almost hear the derision with which he says of Nazareth, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us?" And then Jesus of Nazareth, in what is only the third time we hear him speak in Mark's gospel, utters his command, and then this unassuming teacher from Nazareth of all places initiates a new order. His kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. All because of the promises that God made first to Abraham, then to Moses, and ultimately to you. And so when life is throwing the kitchen sink at you, and sins or sickness or death or fear plague you, remember that the Lord is faithful, that when God makes a promise, he keeps it. And even when we close our eyes at the last, it is but one short sleep, and we wake eternally. For all things, whatever our failures, our shortcomings, all things, even death, will submit to the one who is making all things new. And he who has wonderfully created you has promised to yet more wonderfully restore you. Trust him and live now as if death were but a distant memory, because one day it will be. Like his praise, his people will endure forever. He will not abandon us to the power of the grave, but will raise us. And what is more, he has promised that we will be like him.